Welcome to Blending the Family, the podcast. Topics can range from dads hitting rock bottom, daughters watching their parents divorce, or even what is a good wine for couples to have while talking about finances. Here's your host who has zero musical talent, and we do say zero musical talent, but is wicked on the air drums. It's Tommy Maloney.
Welcome to another episode of Blending the Family. I'm your host, Tommy Maloney. Did I mention this is a podcast? Blending the Family, the podcast. Tommy Maloney, the host. About to take a sip of tea. Ugh. Caught a cold coming back from Tampa. The boy had a hockey tournament. Apparently, he was getting sick. And because he had to get sick, I had to get sick. Did I miss any school? No. I still went to work. All right. On this episode, we have Spring Washam. Spring was supposed to be on back in November, I think. November? When was it? November, December? When I was having my back problems. Anyway, I'm so excited. So excited. We just got done with the interview. I'm so excited to have Spring on this episode of the podcast. So Spring is a founding member and core teacher at the East Bay Meditation Center and a well-known meditation and Dharma teacher based in Oakland, California. She has a new book, her current book, a new book called A Fierce Heart, Finding Strength, Courage, Wisdom in Any Moment. And it was a pleasure speaking with her. One of her, I believe it's one of her mentors, Jack Kornfield, look him up. But I heard an episode of one of my favorite podcasters, Tim Ferriss, talking about visiting Jack Kornfield and doing a 10-day silent retreat. I am so fascinated. I want to do a 10-day silent retreat. I think Peter Thiel did one, and they showed the itinerary for a silent retreat. Excuse me. And it's in my view, in my head, you'll excuse me, I'm on cold medication. But misconception was that I thought a silent retreat meant that I could sit silently, read silently, write silently. No. A 10-day meditation retreat is silently meditating 10 days. I don't know if I could do that, but I'm up for the challenge. And luckily Spring was up for the challenge to be on this episode, as I am trying to be as professional as I can. All right, here's what we talked about. We talked about how a Long Beach, California girl goes to the Amazon and also the Himalayas. Talked a lot about Buddhism. I love hearing about the Dalai Lama, gratitude, mindfulness. You hear that word a lot. It's thrown around a lot, but Spring actually puts it in perspective. So we talk about that. We also talk about forgiveness, and especially if you are in a divorce, have gone through divorce, or dating, and it's hard. Forgiveness is hard, and we talk about, for example, how bad I was at forgiveness, and still bad. But I'm trying to get better. All right. I was talking to, and I guess I should have mentioned this earlier, but anyway, I was talking to a digital marketing guy, and he's like, well, on your podcast, you need to mention that you have books, that you do coaching, and all that stuff. And I said, I'm not really comfortable as I sit here and mention it now. But anyway, I'm just not comfortable with that. I just want to have a conversation with our guests. I want to have a conversation with you. If you're interested, go to the website, blendingthefamily.com. You'll see products. You won't see one book. You have to go to Amazon to get that book. And I'm not mentioning anything. I'm just letting you know, hey, I've got products. Hey, I do coaching. Hey, I do speaking. But the point here is, that's it. I'm not going to, spam you. Anyway, that's enough. Enjoy this episode. Spring Washam, again, her new book is called A Fierce Heart, Finding Strength, Courage, and Wisdom in Any Moment. Enjoy. I know you will. All right, so I have to ask, Spring, where does parents came up with that name? What was the dealio of? Because I think it's a pretty name.
With it, parents put it on my birth certificate. Parents thought it up.
I mean, is it a family name, or is it just something they just? Hey, were you born in the spring?
Conceived in the spring.
Ah, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
There you go.
It's grown on me too. I like the name because people often tell me when they meet me in person, "You look like a spring." Now, so I take that as a compliment.
Yeah, you've got the bubbly persona. I like that word, persona. So all right, so I have to ask, so how did a California girl end up doing some very, very cool things, hanging out in the Himalayas, going to the Amazon? I mean, what was that, I'm guessing, I'm no psychiatrist, but I'm guessing because something else I know about you left home at 15. Were all these things like an escapism to hide or explore, or why the Himalayas and why the Amazon?
Okay, well, I think, I did leave home at 15, and the story, it's not like I left home to go on a great spiritual adventure. I was leaving my mom's abusive husband, or her relationship. And we couldn't live there. We couldn't live with her any longer. So it was actually kind of a heartbreaking moment of separating from that situation. And so I want to set the record. I was nicknamed Yogi from the Himalayas as kind of a joke. I wasn't actually living as a Himalayan meditator in caves.
or a relative of Yogi Bear. All right, I'm happy you're setting the record straight, Spring, that you are not related to Yogi Bear.
I am not Yogi Bear. I'm not a descendant of Yogi Bear. Well, we're all descendants, right, of one another. But in the conventional level, there is no, as far as I know, DNA connection there.
Okay.
However, there is a heartfelt connection to those yogis in the Himalayas, I will say. My spirit is connected to that. But really that became a joke when I was younger because I spent like a couple years in retreats. And the retreats I would go on would be at meditation centers, and I would do months and months of practice in silence. And I was very drawn to that when I was in my 20s and even into my 30s. So my book is a lot of stories from powerful retreat experiences at different moments in my life. So that is how I got that title. Now, the Amazon, I can really say, 8 years ago, in order to kind of heal trauma, I was dealing with all this old trauma that I thought I had healed, and I didn't. And I met a psychologist who introduced me to a teacher, and then I ended up going to Peru and participating in healing work in Peru. And I ended up living in the Amazon for a year with an indigenous tribe. So I did do that. That is a real fact.
So where does this, and I'm very fascinated, and this is why I'm super excited about you being on this episode of the podcast, is I've really, probably the past year, have really wanted to explore more and more about the whole Buddhism. But where does this spirituality come from? Is this, again, maybe was there something missing in your childhood, and this is for you to be able to find something? Where does the spirituality for you come from?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I can really honestly say that for me, my inclination towards spiritual principles, towards light, or all that actually came out of pain, investigating why is everyone around me suffering? Why, what is it? What is this human, it just felt so cruel on one level as I was growing up. Like everyone just, and I just wanted to understand really, I guess it's a cliche, but I wanted to understand the meaning of it and the nature of my mind. And so I guess as a very young person, I was very interested in psychology. I started to see right away, it's something with our mind. Problem number one. Right. Big insight, actually. I was very young, and so I started studying that as a teenager. And I was thinking, okay, I need to think better. I need to think differently. But see, they didn't have 20 years ago, 25 years ago, longer than that. I was a teenager, almost 30 now. They didn't have all the meditation apps like they have now, and Twitter pages and YouTube channels. There wasn't, what I was looking for wasn't readily available. And so for me, what I was interested in was suffering and the stress and how do I heal that? That was actually a genuine question that I had. It was my own pursuit to feel better. That was really what led me on the spiritual path. I was looking to reduce my suffering. And I started to look at spiritual practices, and I started off studying science of mind and psychology, and then I went into Hinduism, and then from Hinduism I wound up at this Buddhist retreat by, I didn't even know. I just heard they gave instructions, and then Jack Kornfield, who we were just talking about, this great Buddhist teacher, psychologist, he was leading the retreat. And so I just kind of stumbled onto this and then went, wow. And during the course of a 10-day retreat, I had just a profound experience of living in the present moment, of understanding my mind and hearing the teachings of the Buddha. When, they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears. There was something in my mind. I was tired, and I was only 23, but I was like, I can't continue anymore. It was like I was an old woman. I can't. This isn't for me. I can't. I give up. I don't want to do this anymore. And there was this openness, and so that those teachings really resonated with me as an approach to reducing pain. Living with freedom, trying to understand what freedom means.
I know that you just mentioned the 10-day retreat, and this is again where I'm just fascinated, and I want to dive in my own world of going to a 10-day silent retreat. And recently, I read an article where Peter Thiel. PayPal fame, did a 10-day retreat, and they showed the itinerary, and it blew my mind away, Spring, because it wasn't what I was expecting. I was expecting the ability to, yes, be there in silence, but to be able to write, to be able to read. But from my understanding, it's just meditation.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of retreat you go to. There are some that are very, very just sit. There's schools of different ways of practicing meditation. Where I teach, and I'm on the Teachers Council, is a well-known retreat center, the Spirit Rock Meditation Center. And they teach more sort of an open, there's a yoga class, there's a Dharma teachings, you have breaks for meals, you do walking meditation and sitting meditation. So it's this flow throughout the day. But yeah, they are held in silence. And the idea is to practice living in the present moment. It's like a training. It's like, be here now, over and over. Where's your mind? Come back to the present moment. It's like rehab for your mind, these things.
You bring up a great point about meditation and trauma. And you and I were supposed to connect a while back, and I went through my own little trauma. And I'm going to tell you, the one little thing that got me through it was one of my favorite, you were talking about apps earlier, one of my favorite apps is Headspace. I love Headspace. And this is a plug to anybody who knows Headspace. I want them to sponsor this podcast, but that's just me. Sell. But that was one of the things that really got me through my back pain was listening to Andy's voice and the calming of his voice. What can you say to others going through trauma? Why the benefits of the Buddha, of meditation? What benefits are there out there when people are going through trauma?
Well, when people are going through trauma, which I know a lot about, just my own experience of growing up and reliving it, what happens with trauma is, there's the action or PTSD experience or whatever from our childhood, and then it sort of lives in our system, and then it emerges or can get triggered by other things. I mean, honestly, when I think about it, how can meditation affect that? Well, it's kind of just like what you just described. In a way, you just answered it. That calm voice as you're reacting, because what is trauma made up of? Painful emotions, right? Usually fear, terror, rage, sorrow, despair, sometimes all mixed together. And then usually what accompanies that is painful body sensations. So what we're talking about is pain and suffering at its most intense, right? So the question is, how do we learn to be present with that? And there's a lot of ways you can be present through meditation, and there's a lot of ways you could try to get out of that through escapism or shutting it down with drugs and alcohol, or acting it out in violence on others, or, as a way to cope with it, as a way to get rid of it. People are always trying to get rid of this feeling, get rid of the feeling. But the most compassionate response to those moments where everything feels like it's unraveling, and it's important to realize that it's a moment in time, right? We have these triggers, just like you went through something a few weeks ago, but here you are again, right? It's like, okay, it arises, it has its life, and then it passes. But I think it's really important to be able to be with it. And as you just described, Headspace helped you be with that, right? The guided meditation, right? It's like reminding you, just be here, just open to it, just be gentle, find your breath. I mean, that's what we want to do in our most dramatic moments, but often we don't do that. As human beings, we add on layers of more pain and stress through resistance, through acting out, so meditation gives us what I would call an appropriate response.
What about, you've got the East Bay Meditation Center. What are people looking for when they come there?
Help me deal with my stress. That's the question. I'm stressed out. I have 3 kids, or I have this going on, I have that. It's like, help me with my mind. I mean, this is an epidemic. Our minds are insane. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
Just look around all the blocks, it's like, oh my Lord, this is like, it's out there, right? And so what we're trying to do is people are trying to learn how to deal with their minds in a healthy way. And through mind training and practices of living in the present moment. So we teach people how to become present, not living in the nightmares of our thoughts. This is the problem. Everyone thinks that's like these stations going all the time. It's like 24-hour news cycle, And so how do you stop that? You begin by training for short periods of time to almost unplug, come into the present moment. And in the present moment, it's like, okay, there's nothing. Oh, it's just my breath, right? So before right after one nightmare story ends, right before another one starts, there's this moment called now. It could be very quick. So what we're training is to help people discover what's beyond the insanity of thoughts in the mind and stories that we're telling ourselves over and over. This is very painful.
So somebody comes to the East Bay Meditation Center. They've never done anything of the sorts of meditation. How do you walk a beginner through the so-called monkey mind? How do you control or have them control, their thoughts? And is it just teaching them breathing techniques? So if I'm a rookie coming to your facility, what are they learning?
So what they're learning to do, and we don't try to tell people to stop the monkey mind. We tell people just to become aware. Awareness. That's really what we're teaching people, is awareness. Mindfulness is a word you hear everywhere. It's a very important word. It comes out of the Buddhist tradition, but it's not associated with that. But the Buddha taught the practices of mindfulness, awareness, knowing, being in the moment. When you're sipping your tea, right? You're here, right? And so that's what we're teaching, is mindfulness. We're teaching people how to be aware. And we use the breath, not because we want people to be breath experts and know, various breathing exercises. That's not the point. The point is awareness. We use the breath because we develop awareness, right? If I'm feeling my breath, guess what? I'm not lost in the narrative of my insanity. I'm actually feeling my breath. See, the mind has something to become aware of. It needs something to practice on to develop awareness. So when people come to our center, like with every program, every class, there's always a 30-minute meditation, and we just talk about mindfulness, awareness, and then we sit.
And what, again, so if I came to your center not knowing anything about Buddhism, the Dalai Lama, so to speak, because, when people think of, the Buddha, they correlate it to the Dalai Lama. What, do a lot of people have these preconceived notions when they come to your center? Do they think that there's going to be a bunch of people in robes, incense? What's their experience going to be like?
Well, it's not a lot of people with robes and incense, because we are in downtown Oakland and we're not monastics. We're like a modern, urban community, right? You open the door, it's a slice of life, coming in the door. And my thing is that, we share Buddhist philosophy, but Buddhist psychology and Buddhist philosophy isn't about those outer things, right? I always tell people to look at the Buddha as a great psychiatrist.
Ooh, I like that.
Yes, because it's not about becoming something. It's not about wearing beads and robes. It's about looking at our mind and how can we get better, right? It's like going from insanity to clarity. That's what we want. And ultimately more happiness. So that's what we're teaching. We're teaching a path to peace, and we're incorporating, we incorporate other traditions as well, but we're focused, the core, like the roots of the tree is in Buddhism, but we also incorporate, Rumi poetry and, teachings on Black Elk, the Native American man. We teach on all kinds. It's incorporated as kind of like a world tradition, a world influence, But mostly what we're teaching people is how to end suffering, how to find peace by living in the present moment. And I don't tell people when they first come, this is going to be really hard, or you got to know anything. You come, you sit, you learn it for yourself by doing. That's one moment at a time.
All right, so you're hinting towards stress. And I guess I believe I've heard this before it was explained by Tim Ferriss about the two different stresses. You know, we have good stress and you have bad stress. But it just seems that, and I try to be as positive as I can. I really do. But it just seems right now, and I try to explain to people the difference between my world, which equates to my family, and the world, everything outside it. The world doesn't really affect me unless I let it affect me. So what can you tell people and listeners about how meditation can help them take negative stress and reverse engineer and flip it to positive stress?
Right. Well, I guess I haven't heard that particular view from Tim, and Tim is newer to meditation, by the way. So that wouldn't be the person I might go to understand meditation. I think Jack Kornfield would be someone with, who was a monk for 6 years in Thailand, who's taught, and Tim is great. I think he has great about certain things. So I don't know the direct context, but I think what we're looking at is how to work with difficult emotion. When there's anger, when there's sorrow, or when, as human beings, we all encounter difficulties. People die, people get sick, people are separated from their loved ones, people don't get what they want, heartbreaks happen, people get fired, right? So there's that level that I'm talking about that is it's like a fact of life. This is actually how it is here, that you will probably experience these things. And so what we're really looking at is how to deal with this human experience, right? And how to look at our mind's relationship, which is kind of what you're getting at. How do we respond to life, the things in life we can't control? Do we go with the flow? Can we let go? Can we forgive? Can we learn to forgive? Can we learn to see that even like my book, A Fierce Heart, Finding Strength, Courage, and Wisdom, is about just that power to be with what is difficult, right? With strength, courage, wisdom in any moment, the good moments of our lives and the heartbreaking ones. And I think what's beautiful about the Buddha's teachings is that he talked very much about this 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows, that every human life has this. If you're rich, you have rich people's sorrows. If you're poor, you have poor people's sorrows. No one is exempt from this. But it depends also on how you respond to that, those challenges that everybody will meet. No one gets a free pass here. They pretend that they do, but they don't.
So it's fine because I was just getting ready to bring it up, but you brought it up. Let's talk about your book, A Fierce Heart. So take us back. How did this book come about? What was your process to get this book out, and why did you feel this book needed to be out there?
Yeah, I think the thing about a book is that a lot of times people would ask me, because I teach a lot of beginners, right? I'm in downtown Oakland. I teach beginners, 1,000 people, sometimes or more, come through our center every week, right? All these classes, and everybody would ask me, do you have a beginner book? What is this about? How do I do this?
Meditation for Dummies.
What's that? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to know some basic teachings about what is this philosophy, what are you guys, what's the goal? Like people are walking in, they resonate with an evening that they've attended. They go, great, I want to come back next week or on the weekend and do this program or class. And also I felt, so that was the first reason. There was a need from just my direct community that I was a big part of in downtown Oakland. Okay, so that was one level. Then on another level, the Buddhist teachings are very they're sort of written by one particular demographic, older people who are wealthier. It's like it was almost written from a certain view. The teachings are filtered through a certain view. And I thought that's really sad because younger people, urban communities, people, more diverse communities, those are not their experiences, but yet they know these teachings because it's the nature of life. So I wanted to translate some of the teachings that were complex, written in, not to make them real and practical. So I was translating for a new time, a new place. Where we are now is a modern view of the Dharma, so that it can meet the needs of like a single mother with 3 children who works full time. And, what about her life, So not just people who can go on retreats, but like the people living the day-to-day grind. So I wanted to write something that they could relate to with imagery, art, stories that reflect their lives. And my own story is a reflection often of that. So it got woven into the book.
Not to sound naive, but what I'm hearing you say is, and I hope I'm phrasing this right, I really do, but it sounds like that in your view, possibly, the African American community doesn't understand that world? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it's not that, one of the things I think that's really interesting is Buddhism is very new to our country, right? So these teachers like Jack Kornfield and a whole group of Western teachers, they brought many of these teachings and started these big communities and centers not that long ago. We're talking 70s here,
right.
Late 60s, early 70s. So a lot of these communities are being exposed to what we would call Dharma or Buddhist psychology. Many are meeting it for the first time. Like many people, they're learning about it. Just like maybe someone on Headspace might listen to something and go, where did this come from? Or they wind up at Spirit Rock. And they're like, oh, Buddhism? Like, I'm not, I was like, oh, okay. What? Tell me about that. It's still new, right? It still has the smell of fresh bread, it's not old, it's ancient, but it's new to our culture in a way. So what I was trying to do is help those teachings be packaged and shared in a way that communities would say, yes, I see this, yes. Sometimes things have to be translated in ways and languages. You have to speak the language of the community. So it's not just African American, it's Latino, it's brown people, it's people of color, younger people sometimes also, right? They may not relate to maybe a scientific book, right? There's a lot of Buddhist scientists right now. Those books aren't going to appeal to a 28-year-old African American guy in East Oakland, right? It's not, it's world aren't. But hopefully my book would, right? It would say, yes, I know this experience of suffering, because we're not talking about concepts that are hard to get. We're talking about with Buddhism, the obvious that we don't want to see, that we overlook.
Spring, can you define Dharma?
Yeah, so Dharma, that word, the interesting thing about that word is it's used in different ways, different contexts. From the Buddhist tradition, the word Dharma means truth, right? So that can mean the truth of the way things are. Or if we're talking about Dharma, we might say all of the teachings by the Buddha is a constellation of Dharma, like all the massive amounts of teachings, like the stuff the Dalai Lama teaches on, like the Heart Sutra and all these collections of advanced teachings, right? Like, oh my God, I could never get my head around it all. That would be a part of Dharma wisdom, right? That. And I think for this modern place where we are, Dharma, I think that the best translation is, taking refuge is in the truth and compassion and innate goodness. It's something about, the truth of how things are. And I think it speaks to the best of our humanity when we say our Dharma. Our Dharma is like the best in us. Integrity, it's love, it's courage, and in some other way it can be translated as that too.
So your book, A Fierce Heart, the stories, what was your writing process, and how did you determine what stories were going to be put in your book?
Well, I tell this story. I've been telling this story when I go on book tours, and I share that I never felt like a writer. The publishers came to me, and I tried to get out of it a few times.
Why? Why would you want to do something crazy like that? We need you, Spring. We need your written word.
Well, it seemed way too hard. And I go, I don't know how, I'm a communicator. I never carried around journals. I never had diaries. I would see real writers and they would love to write. I didn't even wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to write today. That wasn't my experience and what sort of drove me. But really what it became was that over the last 10 years of being in downtown Oakland, and teaching to communities the beautiful stories that I would hear of overcoming and all odds being, you know how we love those movies where people just like in the mud and they fight their way out, and I would hear story after story and person after person, and I was so touched. And then, me traveling around the world, and I have my organization in Peru, and the stories of people who were in the military and had trauma and healed and are now doing peace work. And, it was just like, oh my gosh, these stories. And really, they're the stories of all of us. We all love those stories of redemption, forgiveness. I would hear it over and over again. And I was thinking, God, these people have fierce hearts. And that word, you're fierce, your heart, wow, you can hold this and you can overcome it, inspired me.
Oh gosh, you just said something in my train. I just lost my choo-choo train, but I know I have it in the note. Forgiveness. That's it. How does somebody learn? And I don't know if learning is the right phrase or word, but how do we overcome somebody doing something wrong to us? So, for example, in my world, I talk a lot about divorce, and we talk a lot about trying to forgive that other person, and not necessarily telling that person that you forgive them, but having that forgiveness. What advice can you give about forgiveness?
Yeah, and that's, when we start talking about forgiveness, we get right to the heart of it, don't we? We get right in there, like these wounds and the scars, the battle scars that we carry through this human life are real, and they're weighty, and they take up space. And I have a chapter in my book called Free Your Heart. And it's about my own forgiveness process with my own father, and also forgiving this man when I was younger who attacked me, and all these different things, and also stories of Nelson Mandela and all these great stories about people forgiving. Because really what we want to do is, if you're on a spiritual path, you have to forgive. If you want to grow in your meditation, and you want to grow as a being, and you want to open your heart, and you want to learn to love others, you have to forgive others. Resentment and an open heart do not go hand in hand. They just don't, right? And the heart is longing to shed all of that stuff. We're keeping a record of things. So when I talk to people about forgiveness, which is a powerful topic, what I talk about to them is forgiving confusion. Because only a human being that is deeply confused would think that by harming me or beating someone or killing them or a group of people, somebody very confused would think that doing that is going to make them happy. Right? If I get rid of these people, if I harm these people, if I abuse them, I'll become a happier person. I mean, that's where a lot of these actions are coming, right? If I deport all these people, if I I put them all over here. I'll be better. But that's not the way it is. And so when I think about forgiveness, what I'm forgiving is confusion, delusion, the mind state of that. So I'm more interested in the consciousness of that, not that person and their actions, right? I'm forgiving hatred. I'm forgiving the mind of greed, right? I'm forgiving that. It's a mind state that people believe, and they believe they're thinking, and that leads them to doing actions that are so painful, not just for the other person, but they're planting seeds for themselves too.
I'm going to stop you right there, because how do you forgive yourself? Are they the same steps as forgiving someone else, or is there different steps for forgiving yourself?
It's the same. Like, if we go back and look at our lives, and I've done a lot of stuff, and on retreats, people come to me weeping all the time with regret. As they sit in the silence of the present moment, they see how they acted from anger. And they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I yelled at them. I can't believe I said that. Now they're feeling it. It's like the purification has started, where we see actions done. So we bring the same mindset, can I forgive myself? Now, if I knew what I knew now, then I would never have done that, or I wouldn't have been so hurtful, or I wouldn't have stolen that item, or I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have got drunk, or I wouldn't have been in that place because I was confused. That's what you hear. I was confused in that moment. And now here I am weeping that I did that to my mother or my child or my ex-partner, or because they do it to themselves. Now they feel that interconnectedness, right? That they hurt, I hurt somebody, I hurt me. So it's the same process. We forgive ourselves for not seeing the truth in that moment and getting lost in the mind state that led to that. There's always, behind very harmful action, there's a mind that's generating it and then the action. Right? If I'm mindful and at peace, do you think I'm interested in harming others?
Well, I hope not.
No. I'm aware, hopefully. The more self-aware I am, the more nonviolent I become.
Well, a couple of things you've said. Number one, and I owe this to my mother. My mother, she would tell me, I would kind of lash out about my former wife, and she would say, she's renting space in your head. And I'm like, yeah, and she's not paying any rent either. And the other thing I would tell her is, very early in my divorce, I would call home to talk to my son, and once my former wife would get on the phone, I'm going to use your word, I would lash out at her. And I would just scream and yell and say, very, very mean things. And I would say this to my mom, and my mom would go, well, how did you feel afterward? Did you feel better? And I'm like, honestly, no. No, because oh gosh, my dharma, my truth was that no, I didn't feel any better, and also it didn't get me anywhere either. So I'm just, it was one of those things where, excuse me, where you do have to know your truth. You do have to know yourself, and like you were just saying, you have, I don't know, have to, but you should learn how to forgive yourself first and then start forgiving others, right?
I agree with you, because if we can forgive ourselves, forgiving others will be easier because we know how to do it. Right? Most people don't know how to forgive others because they've never tried to. And they often, if you find someone who is extremely hateful and resentful for others' actions and hold them and judge them, they're like that with themselves. How could it be any different?
So let me play devil's advocate, and I'm going to sit here and go, Spring, you're talking about the Dalai Lama, you're talking about Buddhism. I mean, this wishy-washy, but it's not real. People are going to hate. if I go up to somebody and I say, "Hey, I forgive you," so on. They don't care. Move on. So how can we? And I just read another article about, I can't think of his name. He's supposed to be the happiest monk on the planet. And he talked about how he'll take, out of an hour, I want to say it's only 10 seconds, but out of an hour, he will send somebody happy thoughts. But that could be mumbo jumbo. So tell me, Spring, how can somebody say, well, it doesn't work? You sending me happy thoughts, who cares?
Right. Well, there's a couple of, I think, responses to what you're saying. And I can talk about it on a couple of different levels. One, let's look at science right now. Neuroscientists are having a love affair with meditation, mindfulness, and Buddhism, right? Dalai Lama isn't just interested in everyone being woo-woo. He's like, let's get the science to prove compassion practice and how it works on the brain, right? So now they have all this really profound research going on that's making it, that question, is this real? Why should I love you? You don't even give it, you don't care about me. Why should I forgive you? Right? I'll hate you. That's more real. Well, it's not actually. Well, they're both real. They both have different results. You're planting different seeds. So what I love about the scientists and Buddhist practitioners studying meditation is that they're proving with brain scans, imagery, all this stuff, neuroplasticity, all of this great science, that it's real. So the skeptics beware, right? And I say this because I've seen so much research, and Spirit Rock at one point was in the middle of a big research project, and of course with UC Davis out here, and that those studies are still going on because they want to collect data for a decade or more to prove that it's real, right? To show that it's real. But so on one level, there's that. There's actual science now about happiness, how the brain works, how all of this functions on a brain level. You plant this, you get that. You plant that, you get this, right? So, and also the same, people who are very negative and send hateful thoughts to others all day, they're planting the seeds of pain and suffering, right? So I always tell people, why not kindness? Why not?
Yeah, I agree, and
I always talk about that. Why not?
I gotta grab my backpack for you. So I have my backpack, and that's the great thing about a podcast. Nobody can see this.
Right.
But in my backpack, Spring, I have this one. I carry. It's funny you're talking about. Well, you don't journal. You don't carry it. I carry technically three journals with me.
Nice.
But they all mean something different. So this journal is a journal that I use every morning. And unfortunately, I have a day job, which we won't go there. Anyway, so when I get there, I have this routine. And I write down three things I'm grateful for. I have another journal that's almost the exact same size, because I bought a bunch of these journals. I love these journals. And I have one next to me on my bed because I will write three things that I'm grateful for that day. So, for example, when I get to work, I write down why I'm grateful for that job. Even though it's not in my comfort zone, I'm still grateful for it because it provides. It provides for my family. It provides, camaraderie. It provides thought process for me because it helps me, even though I've got an hour and a half commute, it helps me think about my day and think about other things. And because I'm one of those people, I don't listen to the music a lot.
Right.
On my way, I listen to other motivational stuff. Excuse me. So I'm 100% on board with you, Spring, because that's one of the things that I've learned is to be grateful for certain things. And I kind of take forgiveness as part of that. And that is, even though my first wife and I, we just, the word hate, but I'm grateful for her because we have a son out of this former marriage. I'm very grateful because I love my son. We get along, all that good stuff. And then I can say I am grateful because of the divorce. I am grateful for my divorce because I met my now wife and my last wife. No more, or else I'm going to have to go become a priest. Thank you for laughing. But I find gratitude because there are so many times, and a lot of things you've said has really resonated with me, that especially, let's just say, I grew up in Chicago, so there are not good parts of Chicago. There are not good parts of downtown Oakland. I've been to Oakland, but I love California. And there are people out there going, well, why should I be grateful? What am I grateful for? And it's, in my opinion, it's sad, Spring, that people cannot find. Again, my little journal here, I write down 3 things. I can find 3 things. I can find 10 things. We all should be grateful for at least one thing every day. And I've rambled on way too long. Back to you, Spring.
I agree with you. I think that's a beautiful way to think about that. The end of our time is to think about that gratitude. Exactly. What are we grateful for? And, life is so short and it's very impermanent. It's a mystery. And for a lot of times, I think about, how do I want to live? I don't want to look at how other people are living, but how do I want to live? And for me, a life of service and learning to open my heart and caring, planting seeds of love and compassion, planting trees, learning, helping, growing. That's what I choose to do. And I think more and more people are as well. And I like to focus on that, not what's going, the messed up parts. Those are there. I'm aware of them. I can hold that. But what I choose to look at every day is all the beautiful stories that are not reported.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as the saying goes, if it bleeds, it leads. And that's why I don't, from time to time my wife will turn on the news. I'm like, no. And it's really weird because I physically get sick if we have the news on, because it goes back to the difference between the world, which is the news, and my world, which is my family. And I have to be away from that. I'll come into my home office and I'll find something, I'll go read, but it's somewhat disheartening that we can't find ways to, like you were talking about, showing compassion or loving others, or one of my favorite, I want to call him a mentor. I've never met him, but is Darren Hardy, who used to be the publisher of Success Magazine. And he was talking about in one of his audio programs how, you're driving to work, traffic stops, you know why, there's an accident. Once you get to that accident, you look over. We're just ingrained. Versus, and I've started this habit of, if I am on the road driving, I will slow my car down so I can watch as much as I can the sunrise. because I want to try as much as possible before starting my workday to have as much positive energy in me. And so I'm not, I'm not Eeyore. I want to be Tigger. I try my best to be Tigger before I'm Eeyore. It doesn't always work out that way. And that's why, to go back to our original conversation, this is why I'm fascinated by the whole Buddhism movement. And this is why I'm more and more going, I got to start saving my money because I want to come to your retreat center. Can anybody come to that retreat center?
Yes, Spirit Rock Meditation Center, sure. Just look on the website. It's a year-round retreat center, beautiful retreats, all kinds of people. Everybody's welcome there. You can just look on the website and read about all the upcoming retreats, what's interesting for you, what calls you. And the retreats they're not all 10 days. Some are 7, some are 3, some are 5. It's all different.
And again, I'm just fascinated by a silent retreat. How does somebody get through? Let's go to the extreme. A 10-day silent retreat, and from my understanding, it's a lot of meditation. It's not necessarily you're in silent doing something other than meditating. All right, so I come and I say, Spring, I'm pumped up. I've got 10 days. I want a silent retreat. How do I prepare myself? How does somebody prepare themselves for a 10-day silent retreat?
Maybe just starting with meditating for 30 minutes a day. Yeah, it's surprisingly challenging, but also easy at the same time. It has its ups and downs. It's hard for me to describe. It's a calling for people to go on retreats. That's why meditation is a calling for people. Millions and millions are looking into it because it's a calling towards stillness, to stopping all the madness. It's like we press the pause button on this machine, right? And it's just going, and we just pause. And in the pausing, there's something really nourishing.
And that you bring up a great point, is why I find meditation helpful is because of I can occasionally put that pause button on, and even though if there's chaos going on, I know I have that pause button, and that pause button has helped me a lot, especially as a dad. It's really I guess you would have to ask the kids, but I feel like ever since discovering, I guess my wheelhouse for meditation, I feel like I'm a calmer person. For example, when I've taken business trips and there's chaos in the airport, or there's chaos at the rental car, or chaos at the hotel, I feel a calmness that I can just reach for. Again, to use the pause button, where, especially, for example, at hotels, and, you get there and there's a customer in front of you screaming at the staff, and I'm just like, why? This, it's not their fault that the reservation, and I think you nailed it on the head, is that ability to take the skill of learning meditation. And I know there's so many different varieties of meditation out there, but especially as parents, you have, like in our household, you've got one teenager who has a basketball game on one side of town. You've got another teenager who's got a hockey game. And how do you do this? Well, you put that pause button on, you relax, you calm, and you figure it out. You just figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Some days, you let them figure it out.
That's exactly right. And so there you go. I think that's just a great punctuation as an ending point about we're all figure it out.
Thank you for listening to Blending the Family. Click here to return to your normal life.